Now, it was a rough end to the week on Wall Street. You saw it. The Dow dropped more than 2,200 points Friday, closed out 2 days of steep losses. Tech-heavy NASDAQ entered a bear market, closed nearly 6% lower. That's a more than 20% drop from the NASDAQ's record high in December. Now, the plunge came after President Trump announced tariffs against 185 countries. Got even worse after China retaliated and announced 34% tariffs on all imported U.S. goods. Businesses and Americans are digesting President Trump's tariff announcement. So let's break down the impacts with Greta Peisch. She's former general counsel for the Office of the U.S. Trade Representatives. Greta, good to have you. We heard from the president via social media yesterday, and just minutes before the market closed, he posted on one of his accounts in all caps, "Only the weak will fail." And the fail is relative. But what do you make of the framework, the framing that the president's putting against or around these tariffs?
Well, thank you for having me. The president is following through on something he's been talking about since the campaign and since coming into office, that he wants to reset trade relationships, to put in tariffs that, in his view, are reciprocal, that are counterbalancing actions that other countries have taken against the United States and their treatment of the United States. And in his statements, when he announced these tariffs and since, really signal that he means it, and he's digging in, and he is not going to react, at least in the short term, to the movements of the market.
Well, we are seeing some reaction overseas. Cambodia has announced that they're going to immediately work to lower tariffs on U.S. imports there. Let's take Cambodia as an example here. I think 49% was the tariff that the president placed on imports into the U.S. from that country. But last year, the U.S. imported nearly 40 times the value of goods from Cambodia than the goods that Cambodia imported or sent to the U.S. So the trade deficit was the starting point here. 321 million exports from Cambodia, 12.7 billion imports from Cambodia. That is not going to narrow substantially because of their population, their economy. How do you get to closing that gap or eliminating the tariffs when you're dealing with a country of that size economically?
That's a great question. And the way that the president and the administration has talked about this is mirroring the trade barriers that other countries impose on the United States. But as you mentioned, in fact, that's not how they've calculated this tariff. It's based on the magnitude of the trade deficit relative to exports to the United States. So it raises a great question for an economy like Cambodia. They are very export reliant. They manufacture mostly low-cost goods, textiles, other products to the United States. And they don't purchase much of what the United States sells, which are aircraft, other high technology products, agricultural products. They probably import some, but there really isn't a room to balance that trade relationship. They can, as they have proposed to, reduce trade barriers, but only so much, right? It's not going to equalize our trade with a country like Cambodia.
Yeah, so those non-trade barriers, which the Commerce Secretary, the Treasury Secretary, the President himself have highlighted as where they say that these countries are, quote, taking advantage of the United States. Give us a timeline. You've negotiated these trade agreements and disagreements as they are. It can take years, can it not?
Absolutely. I mean, some of these barriers are quite complex. They're in other countries' legislation and regulations. You can't just snap your fingers and make those structures go away. And layered on top of that, you have negotiations with potentially over 100 countries simultaneously who are all coming to the administration saying, what can we do to remove these tariffs? And you just don't have the capacity to talk to all of those countries at once, much less even a handful who have quite complex and entrenched trade barriers that the United States faces.
Yeah. Some of these negotiations and impacts are at this point at 30,000 feet. There is also the loophole for people who are buying their short sets and their sundresses on Shein or housewares on Temu, these companies in China, and they're coming here. The president has closed a loophole, and people are going to have to start to spend more as they just go straight to these websites to buy these items, right?
Absolutely, that's correct. So in U.S. law, there is an exception for tariffs, but also the formality is the kind of filing and sort of red tape that goes along with importation for those small packages at $800 or less. And with respect to China, one of the orders that the president signed this week was to remove that treatment. And so that means you're not only paying the tariffs and needing to calculate what are the tariffs on those products and the shippers needing to do that for customers, but also bringing those products in with all of the documentation and information about what's in the packages in order to comply with the normal importation rules.
Greta Peisch, a lot changing, and we'll see if April 10th is implementation day for some of these higher tariffs. We'll see what happens then. Thank you. President Trump gives TikTok more time to find a buyer before being banned in the U.S. Team coverage from the U.S. and China. We have that for you straight ahead. Plus, it's a high-stakes court clash in the making. The Trump administration appeals a federal judge's order to bring a Maryland father who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador back to the U.S. Plus, a Department of Defense Inspector General opens an investigation into the Signal group chat scandal. What we know about it a little later this morning.
Thailand, where the craftsmanship of Thai silk inspires a nation of opportunity, advanced technology, and innovation.